Absolutely, E. Keep the advocacy for my non-existent watch going. Send those super chats. But before we read the super chats, we got to get into E's NXT report slash Kennedy report, which there isn't a bunch of NXT news other than the Undertaker Trick Williams stuff, which we'll have a little fun with that later. He did note that Mr. Kennedy talked about a story when he was on a flight sleeping. Vince McMahon would low crawl with a bag of hard candy like butterscotch you get from grandma if he would see you sleeping. Vince would toss one at a person, ding them in the head, and wake and be like, "What was that?" and go back to sleep. And then Vince would throw another one. Vince loves to mess with people. You don't say he liked to mess with people. Yeah, kind of seems to be his MO that we've learned about over time. Well, that's enough of me reading E's chats. Let me introduce myself. What's up, guys? I am Rob. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, a Brass Ring Media podcast right here on the Brass Ring Media YouTube channel. What's up, guys? Happy Wednesday. Happy Nocturnal Wednesday. Happy pre-AEW show, as some of you guys have branded it. What's up, Zach? It's National Vanilla Ice Cream Day. Shout out to Vanilla Ice Cream. I don't know where you guys are in your ice cream rankings. I don't know if we have like an ice cream tier list to break out as a late summer kind of thing, but I don't know. You can take your sherbet, your chocolate, your strawberry, your Neapolitan. You could just get all that out of the way. All the world needs is vanilla. Hell, all the other good, actually like good flavors, like cookie dough, like all of those are all based off of like the base of vanilla. Like when you go to McDonald's, right? That machine's never working, not for your chocolate cone or for your strawberry cone, it's for your freaking vanilla cone. I don't care if it's boring. I don't care if it's generic. It's literally the name of generic, vanilla. Okay, thank you for bringing that to our attention, Zach. We really needed our vanilla thing. You know, E, I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm lactose intolerant. I'm more like lactose. I don't know what's the little less than being intolerant, like lactose behind the times. So ice cream will get me, but it's not bad enough that I can't prepare for it. Like, but it's a whole thing I gotta lay out. What's up, Archie? Hey, boss. What's up? Vanilla and Jimmy's. Is that another kind of anniversary for today? So, for those of you who are new, which I can't imagine there is many of you, it's most of the same crew. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I am Rob. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, and we are Brass Ring Media. Now, for those of you joining for the first time, what we like to do is Wednesdays about this time for about an hour, as we're kind of having a little fun before Dynamite gets started. We like to talk a little pro wrestling, but we like to do it at our own speed, our own pace. We like to go off on tangents about relevant stuff, irrelevant stuff, all that good stuff. And today, got you, boss. Today, I think we're going to talk quite a bit about Raw. Punk and Sanu. Punk and Sammy. What about Punk and Sammy? I might be missing you there in the chat. Catch me up, Azan. If I miss something, if there's a big news piece, I'll go back on and we can break format. But let me know what the hell you're talking about, Azan, and then I will get back to it. I think largely today, unless Azan has some huge breaking news about Sammy and Punk. And I think maybe he's talking about the headline that I have here, and it'll tie into everything. We're going to talk about a few things from Raw, particularly the final segment from Raw, because I think there was a lot going on in that final segment. Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman, Braun Breaker, absolutely, boss. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And that whole segment just got me thinking about a bunch of things, a bunch of like meta questions right now about WWE. So I kind of want to explore where we're at with some of that stuff. Like, do we have the right babyface that we need right now? Do we have enough babyfaces Does the WWE universe have a hero? Do they need a hero? Do they deserve a hero? And as kind of I guess, an extension of that, it's time to go. It'll be time to go to WWE.com. Check out the roster. And I got one idea, but we got to find who or what is going to be like the next guy. Because I got to tell you, whenever you're thinking about who the next guy is going to be, it's not the easiest deduction in your head, like it always is. WWE's overcrowding with baby faces right now. But is there one we need? Is there the one we need? Is Roman the one we need? We will talk about all of that. We will have a little fun, maybe with the NXT and the Undertaker's appearance last night. I was seeing some reports just as I was popping out the microphone that NXT did a huge number last night, not surprising, featuring the Undertaker on an episode of NXT. And you got to feel for NXT; they're always getting the table scraps. So they seem to exist as a promotion, at least on in their premium live events, just to counter program AEW. That is their sole function. There's another one right there, Randy. Good pick, although he's kind of tied up doing something else. Right. So we will discuss all of that, and then I'm gonna have a soft launch of a new segment. So I got some mixed feedback from you guys, and I mean that in the nicest way, on our setting the record straight segment. Now, I am not going to be setting the record straight this week. I repeat, I will not. This guy you're seeing right here, this is a gimmick. This is a character. It'll be nothing but serious wrestling talk. We will not be setting the record straight. Doesn't mean the segment is done. It's just going to be a new segment this week, which let me tell you about that new segment while you can't see me. Maybe I should mute the mic. What do you guys think? Kind of kills the mystique, kills the kayfabe. Back to normal, Rob. How did that happen? Like magic, right? No. This week, it's going to be the soft launch of a much bigger and ongoing and enduring segment that we're going to have week after week on this show. We are going to have one of the initial editions of the Wrestling Tweet Hall of Fame. It's very important. I've been working the phones for weeks trying to get this organization off the ground. There's tons of legwork to be done, footwork, all the body parts of work to be done. You know, the Smarks love it when we work the leg. So we'll be doing that for sure. All right. I have wasted way too much of your time, 10 minutes to be exact. So I'll waste a little more with a sip of water. All right. Let's get to it, guys. Monday Night Raw this week was interesting, to say the least. Now, I saw in the chat that Boss mentioned how the women's roster has been killing it on Raw. And I think Boss was absolutely right with that assessment. In particular, the last 2 weeks. Now, the Raw as a whole, I think, has had a bit of a rough stretch since the build to WrestleMania, I would say. Wasn't quite post Netflix, because even though those shows were weird, getting used to the new format and style of Raw, I think took a minute, and there was a bit of novelty there that made those shows quality, especially with the level of big matches and pay-per-view matches that they were putting on some of those early editions of the Netflix Raw. What I think what happened, though, is that was in the build to WrestleMania season, so there wasn't a ton of PLEs. In fact, if anything, this year, the schedule around WrestleMania season kind of cleared out, and those were the wrestling shows until we got to WrestleMania. Now, since WrestleMania, we have had PLE after PLE after PLE, and I think the editions of Raw have felt weaker, not just because of that. They felt weaker because, quite frankly, it's been a very repetitive show. It's been a lot of Seth Rollins and CM Punk attacking each other and doing the same thing week after week after week after week. A lot of the same Jey Uso stuff, a lot of the same Gunther stuff. It's been a lot of that. And for a while, we were talking about how the women's division in WWE as a whole was just such a weak spot in the company. It was actually amazing that AEW, a company that historically had not done a good job of booking their women's roster, was lapping WWE in terms of women's wrestling. I still think they're ahead on balance right now on the overall scorecards, but the women's division, in particular the Intercontinental division on Monday Night Raw, is one of the most entertaining things in wrestling on a week-to-week basis, with all three characters at this point playing to some really, really interesting stakes with the situation of where Bayley's going to go, the heel character of Becky Lynch, who, even if she's not necessarily getting the genuine heel reaction, I think she's doing her job of getting Lyra and Bayley over. So all of that is really working. Men's side, I think there's some issues. The reaction out of Raw seemed to revolve around two different segments. Raw was bookended this week by what you could say are their two main male singles storylines or wrestlers. You opened up with CM Punk and Gunther. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on CM Punk and Gunther because it doesn't seem like WWE has spent a lot of time thinking about how they're going to build CM Punk and Gunther. The feedback on the Punk promo from most of y'all have been that it was rather boring, generic, paint by numbers. And then, what's up, Fernando? And then Gunther came out there, as the boss has mentioned, and actually cut, I think, a better promo, a little bit shorter, a little bit more succinct, and with some truth to the matter. Also, I think we're at a little bit of a weird spot because WWE fans, at least like the ones I think on the internet, a little unsure how to feel about CM Punk right now. If you watch the shows, the man is clearly over. Like, none of this hypocrisy stuff, none of that is really seemed to resonate. But you get the idea that those who watch a little more intently, the week-to-week people, those of you who would be in the chat who are watching shows like this, you're subscribing to Fightful and The Observer and The Torch, and you're all in. There's been a little bit of a cooling on CM Punk from the off-the-field stuff. And I think it's not necessarily that he's declined as a wrestler or a promo in the last couple of months, and he's at some really high watermarks, but the show as a whole is not doing well, and he's like at the helm of everything that's going on. And then fast forward it, the other big segment, which was largely a talking segment until it got serious, was the closing segment. Finally, after how many months it was since WrestleMania, was Roman Reigns going to address the big betrayal by Paul Heyman. And I should not really mention, not really the betrayal. I guess the betrayal would have happened when Heyman aligned with Punk going into that match. But the fallout that's happened since, the pivot to Seth Rollins as the person whom he would be backing, the acquisition of Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker, and setting up this Heyman family, Dangerous Alliance, to whatever it is. This faction that, quite frankly, now with whatever's going on with Seth's injury, seems to be DOA at the moment, and we got to resuscitate this. But this was Roman's time to come out there, and it was an interesting spot for Roman. One that I remind you, he hasn't been in a lot in nearly half a decade. So, and I'm not the first one to point this out, but it has been noted. Roman Reigns, for about 4 years, you can argue that stretch made him the biggest heel in company history. It was for a promotion that I think historically is known as a babyface promotion, has never quite been under the tyranny of a heel the way they were under Roman Reigns from the middle of 2020 until WrestleMania in 2024. Now, in that time period, by the time it was all said and done, the audience had grown such respect for what Roman was doing in his heel character that they were absolutely ready to cheer him whenever he came off of that, basically, whenever the title wouldn't be around his waist. And honestly, that's about as much effort as anyone has put into things. The WWE, I think, that acknowledged that Roman had gained a great deal of popularity and respect during his heel run and has done nothing to change his character. In fact, I would say that in general, the Roman Reigns character arc, or people in production, in creative, caring about Roman Reigns, seemed to dissipate right after WrestleMania 40. We're not talking about WrestleMania 41, talking about WrestleMania 40. Ever since then, there's been really no focus to the character. Whenever the Roman Reigns character has come back, he's just kind of continuing off of old stuff, settling old scores, not a ton of evolution, but really good reactions. So there's never really been this come to Jesus babyface moment for him. But here it was, Roman Reigns was out there to carry a segment on the mic as a babyface. Now, before we praise him or are critical or anything like that, we should note that regardless of our thoughts now, there was a time 6, 7, 8 years ago where the prospect of Raw closing with an extended Roman Reigns promo felt like the death spot. There was no way you would ever build around that because Roman simply couldn't cut a promo that way. The character wasn't built that way. There was not enough investment from the fans to just listen to what he had to say after every word. So it was a situation often the start of Raw might have a big Roman promo, but they didn't really put him in those situations a lot. They put him to get dumb promos like suffering and succotash, and he'll be the first to declare the good old days, the salad days of the Roman Reigns stuff. Or as some have pointed out, he ends up in one of these like quasi work shoot kind of things that he used to do with Cena or one of these guys. So you don't have a ton of history with him doing the big babyface promo. Now, when he came out there, I thought he did a pretty damn good job, all things considered. Everything that we could say, the audience was 1,000% into him as a babyface. There have been many times in the past where Roman Reigns has come out to the infamous mixed reaction. And with Roman, at times, that reaction wasn't even mixed. That reaction with Roman can be just straight up negative. But that was not the case on Monday. The crowd was into him. They were hanging on every word. And this was one of those. I went back and I've watched it a couple of times. Actually, the full clip was posted to YouTube, so I didn't have to get back into Netflix to watch it. And you go back and watch that promo, and it is Roman Reigns coming in there with full confidence, running down all of his grievances towards Paul Heyman. Now, others have already pointed out how the content of what he had to say didn't make sense or couldn't really resonate, that it was ahistorical. Now that I think we can pick nits on here or there. There's not a lot of heels that turn babyface and they have to completely like we don't go on full atonement. We always like to say there has to be some movement and some growth, but and I think it's okay. Is what I'm saying, that if the past is remembered a little bit differently when the baby face is cutting the promo, because whether the past was one way or it's not, we're in the current set of circumstances that we're at, and the characters can only go off of them. But when I'm out there, and Fernando's noted, and absolutely this was the case, he was forced on us. That's why we booed 100%. I was in the audience at WrestleMania 32, and it was the most dissonant thing from what you watched on TV and how he was talked about on TV and what the feeling was like towards him in that building. Huge contrast. But when I'm listening to the Roman Reigns babyface promo, I'm enjoying it. I think he's doing a good job with his delivery. I don't really care about the total factuality of every one of his claims, but it seemed to fit good enough, I think, within the context of the storyline they were trying to find or to reach. But my question for you guys largely is, how do you feel about Roman Reigns as a babyface? Because I'll be honest with you, it's not something we've really had to deal with in half a decade. It's been so long since we've had to deal with this premise. There was a time, again, the idea of the never ending Roman Reigns babyface run, that was a burden. That was an albatross. But him coming out here as a babyface to carry all the weight, not having anything there, I thought he passed this test with flying colors. But I don't know if this is really sustainable. And it brings me to my overall thought that yes, while WWE has a ton of baby faces, is there a baby face? Is there the baby face? Now, I think you can argue that the baby face is Cody Rhodes. And if you say that, I'm fine. But I don't think that completely ends the argument. And so it makes me wonder, is it worth it to invest in Roman Reigns as a babyface? There's a few things at play. I don't know if he could ever really be anointed to that top babyface spot anymore because of his lack of consistency on these shows. You do need a babyface to be around somewhat. Roman Reigns is around even less now than when he was the champ. But when he was the champ, I don't think his absence affected stuff as much because the storyline was there, his presence was there, and as a heel, him not wrestling as often as everyone else kind of works out for him. If he's just an occasional come in babyface, does that have the same kind of resonance? Are you going to go down that ride with him? You know, Cody likes to talk about being that QB1 kind of character. I don't think that's ever going to happen with Roman again. So it just makes you wonder, how is it that they can pull off Roman in an interesting babyface feud? Because I will say this, despite how much I thought the delivery was good, how much there was a certain confidence to him that he just never had before. Roman, this is a case of Roman cuts a decent promo. He knows how to cut a promo, and it was okay. But it goes beyond the promo. It goes in Roman Reigns being the hero of the story, being someone you can get behind. Or is he just kind of piecemeal? Is he meant to be lurking in the background? Is he meant to be kind of a character like The Rock was before everyone kind of hated The Rock, where they are ostensibly a babyface? Or maybe even The Undertaker would be a better analogy, but you only see him every now and then. They're your hero when you're there, but you're not your consistent hero. And I think it's going to be, it's a hard thing for Roman Reigns to pull off, because at the end of the day, no matter how much people want to get into him, no matter how much people have a respect for him and want to cheer it, that whole act, his whole presentation, that's a heel. Every part about that is a heel. Roman Reigns may be a cool guy that you can kind of identify with a little bit from afar, but don't forget, once you get into the weeds with him, Roman Reigns is nothing like you. And very, very quickly, that babyface can disconnect from the audience, and we're going to end up with maybe another kind of CM Punk. I don't know if Roman Reigns quite runs that risk, but I don't know if it's one that's willing to take. And I kind of feel like that's why, despite, as you guys are mentioning, the glut of baby faces that they have, there's not a true focused baby face right now on the show. And maybe this will change when you consider both brands whenever Cody and Cena wraps up at SummerSlam. I got no idea what direction that's going in. I could easily see either man walking out next Sunday, because I assume that's the night to main event. I could see either man walking out with the title. And maybe that's the solution there. Maybe once Cody is back fully and firmly in that QB1 role, if that's where he's supposed to be, then it doesn't matter about the baby faceness of Roman Reigns, of the babyface overness of CM Punk, or the eventual delayed gratification of Sami Zayn. But the Roman stuff wasn't, to me, the absolute most interesting part about that segment. To me, the bigger takeaway and talking point from that segment is you got Cena being under duress and not able to compete in that match. So I thought that segment was pretty good on SmackDown. I like the way it all ended up with making him sign it. I loved what they were doing with Cena right before that, though. I love the idea of Cena like backing out of the match, and like finally the little bit of a window when Cena was being a chicken who was mentally exhausted. That little bit that we saw there, it's almost as if, oh my God, I wish I could have had that for the last 6 months. That actually sounds like that could have been a heel turn that could work, because we're kind of playing out that string. The Cena heel turn, still not cooking, still not doing anything. And one of like 5 albatrosses I say right now that are kind of just holding the company back. It's a very weird year where they were on such a high the last 2 years, and they haven't really bottomed out this year. They're just not what they were in the last couple of years from a creative standpoint. And it's hard to absorb the product right now. It's really difficult being a fan and investing in these shows. And I think it has more to do anything with the volume of PLEs that we are getting. But the other factor, I think, is that Cena heel turn and how it is sort of just set everything into a sideways motion. But speaking of baby faces, and not just baby faces, the other thing about that segment that I thought was interesting is it was finally a time, for the first time in a while, for Roman Reigns to interact with someone that's a little, or with people that are a little further outside of the bloodline expanded universe. A lot of what Roman Reigns did in his heel run were the feuds, the internal feuds, the family feuds. That took up a lot of time. And when he did feud with other people, they were the absolute tippy top of the card. So you have him feuding with the likes of a John Cena, a Cody Rhodes. Probably the lowest level guy who wasn't a member of the bloodline that he feuded with was LA Knight, who has been on a recent ascent. So we haven't seen like the God of Roman grace the younger and newer talent with their presence. And I really feel bad for him, because I feel like there's been a bit of a pile on in the wake of Raw, but it has to be pointed out. For any criticism we can give about that Roman Reigns promo, which is not a lot from a delivery perspective, holy hell, you can see the difference in experience when you compare that to the promos that Braun Breaker cut. Now, I think Braun Breaker is a talented guy. I think by all accounts, Braun Breaker is the future of the company. I have stock in Braun Breaker. I am not going to sell my stock in Braun Breaker anytime soon. But whenever you contrast that with what Roman Reigns put out there, let's face it, guys, Braun Breaker is not quite ready to be the next guy yet. And that's okay. It takes time. Braun Breaker is still relatively new, still relatively young, and he was not projected to quite be in the spot we're in, that he's in right now. Now, a lot of that is contingent on Seth Rollins' injury and the legitimacy of the injury. If Seth is hurt for an extended amount of time, that is super unfortunate for Braun and for Bronson. A lot of people make the Evolution analogy. So think about it like this. If Triple H would have got hurt like a month into Evolution, there is simply no way that Batista, Orton, and Flair could really be expected to carry those 2 years on Raw. Now, you could argue that Evolution shouldn't have carried as much as they did in those 2 years, but regardless, there was something that was relied upon. You would trust Randy Orton to carry that weight now, but you absolutely would have not have trusted him to carry that weight in 2003 and 2004. Braun Breaker, not saying he's not going to get there. He's just clearly not there now. But seeing that got me thinking about, in general, the future. It would seem as if WWE, with some of their signings and the infrastructure that they got, the future in terms of talent is bright. There's going to be big things on the horizon. When you think about the future, I think a guy like Braun Breaker is one of the first names that comes to your mind. But in general, when we look at the top of the card, while some of the guys at the top of the card may be fresh, may be fan favorites and maybe have stories that are unfinished that still need to be completed. Everyone at the top is either a little long in the tooth or have just been around forever. Now, the one person I'm not talking about with this, I guess you would have to say, would be Gunther. Gunther's not necessarily super young, but he's super new, and there's not a character to redeem. There's not this long arc coming all the way around. We're in the prime of Gunther's career, and he's executing as such. But when you think about, in general, the top of the card and who gets to main event, think about the names that come to mind. John Cena, Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Seth Rollins, Jey Uso. The newest being LA Knight, who again is on the older side, but a little bit fresh. All those names I mentioned are names that have gone round and round for years. 4 years, even within the Triple H era, the post-pandemic era. These are people that have been on top for a long time. So in case you haven't really noticed, there's not exactly a lot of new blood breaking through to the main event scene. There's some good stuff you can argue happening with the Intercontinental title scene, but even that tends to be older guys. Now, there are some younger talents on SmackDown. I know this has been heavily focused on Raw. But in general, off the top of your head, and I have one person in mind, can you name who like the next guy is? And I don't mean like the next guy, like not the guy that's going to beat Cena tomorrow, the guy that's going to beat Gunther tomorrow, but who's the next guy? Like there was a lot of time where there was a lot of anxiety about Roman Reigns being the guy. Cena for years was the guy. I think WWE would argue that Cody Rhodes, even though not having the title, he's the guy. So I got to ask you, who's the next guy? Like, I think a lot of people have Sammy as your Rumble winner, but he's another guy that goes way back. He's been around the main roster for about a decade at this point. Now, Braun Breaker, that's one, and I think that's the one of the two obvious ones. But you guys are pointing out Trick, Oba, and Tony D. Well, here's the thing. All those guys are currently in NXT. Now they're getting big pushes in NXT, but there's still some distance there. Brought up a good one in Dominic Mysterio. So what I thought we would do is let's stop with the guesswork. Let's go straight to the source. Let's pull up WWE.com and let's just go through the superstars and see who the heck is going to be the guy. And I should know we were praising the women's division earlier, and they have a few guys, so to speak, in the pipeline. I think they're a little bit healthier there, but there's also less members of the roster. So there's a little bit shorter line if you get hot to go right to the top. So let's pull up our trusty WWE.com. All right, Fernando. We're going to mark down that prediction. I want you to be right just because I want your prediction to be right. I don't have an opinion on the outcome of that, but I want you to be right for now. Let's put up Fernando's chat real quick. Fernando said Braun Breaker is winning the Royal Rumble and wins the world title at Mania. We shall see. All right, WWE.com. It's been a while. It's been a while, but I got to say, compared to most websites associated with pro wrestling, at least my computer can freaking scroll through it. So all of us on the internet wrestling community, none of our freaking websites work. There's your boy Staxy. All right. So let's break it down. Let's go brand by brand here. Let's look at the current. Let's look at who are the free agents. Okay. I don't know if Brock Lesnar is ever coming back, but I would say he's not the future of the company. Omos is interesting. If they ever took Omos off the shelf, he's got WWE size. He's improved a ton. I don't know if he could be the guy, but he's a guy that can definitely be in the mix if they ever find him. I feel like they brought in almost he had to drop his other title that he had, and they just they forgot about him. Like they left him wherever he was. Brock Lesnar is busy staying out of headlines, and his daughter's dating 49ers. That's all I know about Brock Lesnar. And the boss says he was once. He took his football and went home. What if Brock try to go to the NFL now? I like that. I like that prospect better. Of him right now. You know, I don't like almost 50 years old or whatever he is. Trying like he's like, no, guys, I wasn't trying to get out of my contract. I really, really had this NFL dream. And he goes in. All right. Let's look at our Raw superstars here. AJ Styles. Not the future guy, although still around. Akira Tozawa. Not going to be the guy. Austin Theory. I don't think Austin Theory is going to be the guy, but is he going to get a push? What's happening with him and Waller in this whole storyline? And why is Vince still apparently influencing things? How are these guys still on top? Yeah, he's still on the roster page, boss. I kind of agree that he does have the tools. I just think he might be damaged goods at this point. Now, here's a murderer's row right here. Braun Breaker, I think a pretty good candidate to be the guy. Now, is there any chance, and please, please, please let me know in the chat. Yeah, I know they broke up. That's what I was wondering what was happening with like is that breakup leading to a push? Like what I'm saying there is I don't have the mental energy to actually analyze what's going on there. But in terms of Braun and Bronson, is there any chance that Bronson becomes the Batista to Breaker's Orton? And I don't mean how their careers have turned out in totality, because I kind of think Orton will be remembered as the greater superstar than Batista. But if you go back to the mid 2000s, that's not the feeling at all. And is there any chance that not really through fault of his own, but through Braun Breaker having to do too much, having to carry too much of the load in this group, does Bronson Reed seem like a worthwhile alternative? I don't know. I don't know how far you can really go with Bronson Reed, but I mean, he was amazing on Raw last year. Brutus Creed, good choice. Probably going to be a top heel someday. Not exactly the guy. Chad Gable, the die is cast there. CM Punk's like 90 years old at this point, despite being super over. Cruz del Toro is not going to be the guy. Dominic might be the guy. How crazy is that? The Dominic might be the guy. The Dominic might be like the consensus. That's wild. Dragon Lee is kind of at his spot. Americano, the joke is pretty much ran its course. There was a time when Finn Balor was in his prime. Kaiser's a good one. He definitely has the tools, and there does seem to be a desire for the audience to see Kaiser get it done. I don't know if he's got the tools. I don't know if he has everything WWE is looking for. Yeah, there was a time though, I think for years that it felt like the answer to this was Finn Balor. But the time has passed. I mean, it's the saddest thing to see that like his career didn't really go anywhere. There wasn't tons and tons of injuries. There was the one big injury that did set him back at the beginning, but his career has just sort of ended up where it is. And I think like I wonder, like in contrast to like a guy like AJ Styles who came in a year later and I think has had a much more sustained run, or all the other guys that came in from NXT from the Indies about the same time. I mean, Finn's obviously been very successful, but I don't think he's future champion material. They fumbled Finn for sure. Grayson is the other one I think that, again, and he's part of this storyline that they're doing. Grayson's another one that's super interesting, just because he has that WWE look. He's got the mic skills. It's just, I think when it comes to him and Theory and some of these guys, how you have presented these guys in the past matters. Like look at how much headway Jey Uso has had to go through to be a top guy, even though he was presented towards the top of the card for like the last 5 years, but all the past time had seemingly undone it. Ivar's not going to be the guy. Dragunov is very good, but I don't think he's going to be the guy. JD McDonough, nope. I went too far down there. What happened? Well, I scrolled way over there. Skipped like 9,000 people. Jey Uso, not going to be the guy. Joe Tessitore, not the guy. Julius Creed, Joaquin Wilde, not the guys. Karrion Kross is getting the push, and Karrion Kross is serving a role on TV, but future champion, he is not. Kofi Kingston has served his time. There's Kaiser. Now, Logan Paul can very well be champion in the future. I'm not going to discount that. But no one would argue that Logan Paul is the guy. Michael Cole is not the guy. Otis is not the guy. Pat McAfee is not the guy. Pete Dunne could have been the guy at one point. Rhea Ripley was the man at one point in the men's division. Ray's too old. Penta's too niche. Don't know why I clicked on Rey Mysterio there. I'm having some trouble with my mouse. Fantastic podcasting by me. Now all the way forward. Yeah, I get the feeling we're at like 14:59 with the 15 minutes of Logan fame in WWE. Especially because I actually think as he's gotten a little bit better in the ring, it's been a little bit counterintuitive. His matches no longer seem like these weird attractions where it's like we expect him to at least be serviceable in the ring. And that actually detracts from him because now he's just kind of normal in the ring. And no one wants normal. Nobody likes normal. Okay. Rusev, Miro, or any combination is not going to be the guy. He's a good hand. Sami Zayn, been around forever. Again, not a next guy, but I've got Sami winning the title next year. That's my pick. That's my pick to counter the pick we just had in the chat. Sheamus' time has passed, and Seth is already at the top. Tyler Bates on the Raw roster. And there's Xavier Woods is not going to have his Big E and Kofi. Like all three members of the New Day, I don't think are going to win the title. A lot of those guys, I think, would say like Xavier Woods. Actually, this is people might think this is counterintuitive, but in the Vince era, I think Xavier Woods right now would have a shot because the title flipped a lot more often. So you had, especially like from the 2000s on, so many people held titles. Being a champion or being like the next guy wasn't as prestigious, or it's the opposite. Being the guy was the prestigious thing instead of having the title. So I'm going to say, E, that you're saying that Sam, it's not going to happen. Yeah, Tyler Bates the biggest shocker, and that's kind of the point of going through these rosters. Is look at who's on the roster, and Tyler Bate is an absolute shocker there. Really quickly, let's pour through the SmackDown roster, and I think SmackDown has our answer. It's not going to be Aleister Black. It's not going to be Alex Shelley. Could have been Andrade at one point. I thought it could be Dawkins or Ford at one point. Not going to happen. Not going to be Angel Garza or Apollo Crews or Axiom or Berto or Saxton. Now, it's not going to be Carmelo Hayes, but is Carmelo Hayes going to be a thing? What's the story with that? Because it feels like Carmelo Hayes is just there to lose to people constantly. And he's one of the few guys that fits the mold of younger guy on the come up that can be valuable, but they just don't seem to have a ton of interest in using him in a meaningful manner. For whatever reason, let's see. Let me reset that. Is AJ listed on like every show? Yeah, it looks like Tozawa and Styles are listed on both shows. A little bit different of a list there. Okay, that is a dumb list that I'm looking at. So you think he still can? I think the diet in Carmelo is completely cast. There we go. Now we're back on the normal list. Chris Sabin's past it. Cody Rhodes is the current guy. Damian Priest, I think, is at his upper level. I'm not saying he won't win a title in the future. Same thing with Drew McIntyre, but they're not going to be chosen guys. Dexter Lumis is not the guy. Alton Prince is not the guy. Eric Rowan is not the guy. Here's the guy. I just found the guy. Here's the next guy. Jacob Fatu, not R-Truth. I don't know why I clicked on R-Truth. Jacob Fatu is the guy. If anyone can qualify as the next guy, it's going to be Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu has the believableness to him. He's got the Samoan background that is so beloved and enduring. And he's a big badass as a babyface. You know, WWE traditionally likes their big, strong, scary baby faces. I know it can seem a little counterintuitive to have a big, strong baby face, but I think Jacob Fatu is as close as you can get within a WWE type of setting. It's not going to be Tama Tonga or Tonga Loa. It's not going to be Shinsuke Nakamura. It's not going to be R-Truth, Randy Orton. Sure as hell ain't going to be Paul Heyman. Ain't going to be The Miz. Ain't going to be Ciampa. Ain't going to be Uncle Howdy. Maybe it'll be Zelina Vega. I did that little roster exercise just to illustrate that I don't think there's this crop of main eventers that's just sitting on the undercard right now. I think, to be fair to WWE, they have people on the show where I missed him. Yeah, I don't know if he was on the list. I don't think it's going to be JC Mateo or JC Metro, as you put in there. I don't think this bench is, I think there might be some stuff in NXT, but I don't think we're loaded here. I think we're stuck with a lot of the same main event guys unless there can be a breakout star. And maybe that's what I'm getting to here. That maybe in the near future, we need a breakout star to emerge. Someone who seems like they're really going to take WWE by the throat and choke it. Fernando has Fatu versus Braun as the next Brock and Roman. I think that's a pretty good position to be in overall if you're there. I'm just not sure where we are on the timeline. And now all this may be for naught because I don't think WWE fans are completely burned out with those same top guys I've been mentioning. There's still stories to be told there. So there's still seasoning that can be happened. But as far as handicapping it right now, feels a little difficult. Let's look at a few tweets. Check out some tweets here. So I just thought I did see the Unreal trailer. So you best believe that this show is going to cover the hell out of WWE Unreal. That is right up there. No, I have no faith in Solo. No faith in Solo. Check it out though. Look at this headline that was posted yesterday by The Observer. The Undertaker chokeslams TNA champion on WWE NXT. Now, obviously, it was a cool moment for NXT. They got a lot of ratings out of it, but like, good God, does that sort of illustrate everything that feels so weird and bizarre and upside down anymore? And TNA as a whole, is TNA still a brand? I know like AJ made an appearance for them, but I feel like their whole identity is the company that messes around with NXT every now and then. Do they have an identity outside of that? I don't think so. I think that's all they got going on. But that that tweet was just to whet your appetite. So I think what we're going to do on a weekly basis on this show, and I'm glad that you guys are sticking with me for this. And today was a little bit of a rambling and ranting show. Wasn't quite the list and the slides that we're normally used to, but I've never been bored opening my phone and just finding something from wrestling Twitter. It may be a toxic place, it may be a unimaginative place, but there's always something to kind of chew on. So I think every week we should do our best to create a bit of a Hall of Fame. We'll call this the Wrestling Tweet Hall of Fame. Now, because there's not going to be an initial class, I'm not going to have like 50 legendary tweets and then all the rest of them are kind of okay. We're not going to be the WWE Hall of Fame where we did all our damage in the 2000s and we have nothing left, or we got to like make up factions that guys were in order for them to headline. Slow and Steady is going to win the race with this Hall of Fame. So in terms of our initial tweet to put in the Hall of Fame, this is not a first ballot Hall of Fame tweet. This is simply a sample, like a generic tweet, but to open the Hall of Fame on our soft launch. Now, okay, we'll talk about that in a second. We'll close with some Aussie talk in a second, boss. I gotta know, who do you guys think is the greatest wrestling tweeter in terms of just like tweets that can be in a Hall of Fame? Who do you guys have on that list? I would say there are some wild Hogan tweets. We'll give Hogan a little bit of a pass this week until we learn about his condition. There are a plethora of tweets from your favorite dirt sheet writers. I think Meltzer is probably one of the great tweeters of all time, and we can hang around with that. Road Dogg has some great tweets to chew on. Kevin Nash, I don't think of him as he puts out great tweeters, but Kevin Nash is just a great smack talker in general, that I think the tweets are just an extension. Ric Flair, when he's losing his mind, absolutely. We can have, there's also the thing of older wrestling personalities creeping on younger wrestling personalities. But in my opinion, there is one GOAT of Twitter. There's one person who spends all his time on wrestling Twitter, never logs off. And it's really impressive considering this guy runs like the second biggest wrestling promotion in the country. I think you guys are aware of who I'm talking about. But in case you don't know, I'm talking about the man who's probably tweeting right now about the end of Shooter or something. But I'm talking about this man, Tony Khan. Tony Khan has revolutionized the art of the wrestling tweet because he gets in promotion, shots at WWE, and all kinds of other insanity on a tweet by tweet basis. There's such a collection of generic corporate tweets, and I can't believe this guy runs a company and he tweets like this. So for our initial Twitter Hall of Fame, what we're going to do is there's plenty of great Tony Khan tweets to put in there. We could make this segment the Tony Khan Twitter Hall of Fame, and we would never run out of content. But this one got brought to my attention because it's actually celebrating a 3-year anniversary yesterday. And this is when Tony Khan said, and you have to remember the timeline, this is July 22nd, 2022. Thank you, wrestling fans, and your great support of thanks to you. Let's reset that. Thanks to you, wrestling fans, and your great support of AEW. I'm grateful to now be the longest tenured CEO in pro wrestling. Thank you very much for every single person who watches AEW on TV. See you Friday night for Rampage on TNT. So what was you guys remember the context of this? July 22nd, 2022. What was happening around this time? Well, as you're recalling, that was the first Vince resignation. That's when, after all this time, it's time to sit down and thank you. We are. Remember, Vince would open up every show, even though he had resigned, and Stephanie awkwardly came out there to thank him. That was this era. And Tony Khan was patting himself for technically being the youngest CEO, which every longest tenure. That was true. That was true. It was a weird shot, an odd shot to take. And the reason why this tweet stands out to me is not so much on what he tweeted. It is a legendary tweet. But let's look at the AEW timeline here. So what was AEW doing at this time? Let's look at the old Wikipedia. If I go back, and I am sorry, I forgot how to use my computer when I logged on today for some odd reason. On July of 2022, AEW was just coming off of the prior month this glorious event. Remember Forbidden Door 2022? Remember how awesome that was supposed to be, this melding of worlds, and then everyone got hurt, and we ended up with John Moxley and Tanahashi as our big match. Punk ends up getting hurt after the title run, after all the drama had just started. And it's amazing because, well, Tony Khan might have felt like he was on top of the world. We fast forward very quickly to All Out 2022. Now, what happened at All Out 2022? That was freaking Brawl Out 22. That was months before Tony Khan was congratulating on himself on being the longest tenured CEO in pro wrestling. Right before WWE went on this massive 3-year boom period that we're still recovering from. That's why that tweet's awesome to me, because he's sitting there, top of his throne, as if he can't be knocked off. And in the ensuing months, days, weeks, and years until very recently, all that happened to this poor guy was getting knocked off of the throne. So for our initial entry into the Wrestling Twitter Hall of Fame, it's Tony Khan's unself-aware tweet when he, for a brief time period, stood at the top of the pro wrestling landscape. That was a clunky segment. It'll be better next week. Before we get on out of here, we should mention, because it is wrestling adjacent and just something that people are talking about, an end of an era, an end of a dark era fell upon us yesterday, as at the age of 76, Ozzy Osbourne passed away. The Prince of Darkness has finally gone to his final resting place. Now, you asked for, favorite Ozzy or Black Sabbath song. I want to hear from you guys, your guys' favorite Ozzy or Black Sabbath song. I got a few, and I'll throw a few out there. Obviously, Ozzy was very influential on me. Anyone who knows anything about me knows how much I love music. And while metal music didn't turn into be my favorite kind of music, like most people, it was my entry into alternative forms of culture and all those. I think metal is that for a lot of people, because it's a piece of strange or weird culture that is available on TV, on the radio. At least it was at the time. So for me, when I was in 5th or 6th grade, Ozzy was my favorite before I really got into anyone that I actually knew, because Ozzy was the only controversial figure I knew. He was the first guy like that for me. The first guy that I wanted to not necessarily because of his music, just because he seemed dangerous. And I went to some Catholic schools, so Ozzy Osbourne was the biggest devil in the world, literally and figuratively. So I was immediately attracted to Ozzy. When I think about favorite Black Sabbath song, it's weird for me because I tend to prefer actually Black Sabbath with Dio, the Heaven and Hell version. And I don't want to just say one of the hits, but it's probably Sweet Leaf or NIB or one of those. astronomy, maybe, some of these deeper cuts that I could get a little lost with. To me, I like the main hits of Black Sabbath, but a full like album experience of Black Sabbath, I think it's a little too 70s for me. It actually shares a little bit too much with like a Led Zeppelin album, and it doesn't quite do it for me. Even though I think I will say the even though stuff came, it's like the Ramones kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. Malcolm Jamal Warner, so ubiquitous. Just as I saw that face, I was able to point that out. And the way he died too with the drowning, that's just awful. We're talking about Ozzy here, and Ozzy, after years of living a rough lifestyle, died in his late 70s. Lived a very full life. And then you go into the Ozzy career. Now, I am one of the contrarians that I like Ozzy's stuff with Ozzy better than I like his stuff with Black Sabbath. That one time it was a real bat. That's why I had to go get the rabies shot. Thought it was a gimmick bat that they threw on stage. When I think of favorite Ozzy songs, I mean, I love when I think of like the radio hits. No More Tears is a good one. Mr. Crowley is a great one. I loved when I was a kid, and I've always been partial to the Osmosis album, just because that was the album, and that's supposed to be the big comeback, right? No More Tears was followed by the No More Tours tour. It's supposed to be Ozzy had retired in like the mid '90s, and then Osmosis came out, and I loved that album. It's a little sleek. It's a little bit '90s. You have songs like Perry Mason and I Just Want You, and I think those are just like classic. That really like kind of poppy Ozzy with you have Zach Waddle still doing his guitar work. I think you got Trujillo at bass at that point. So a big fan of that. It's also his stuff in the 2000s was actually really good. And it's funny because Ozzy was super famous. The other thing Ozzy we know he's a wrestling Hall of Famer, but like he was just big into wrestling, like a genuine wrestling fan. A lot of people pointing out the stuff when he was like the guest Raw GM and all that, but also WrestleMania 2 or WrestleMania 2 or 3, I can't remember which one, when he makes an appearance and presents a title. And then there were always stories over the years that every time the Raw was in the UK, that Ozzy would actually sneak in and be, somewhat disguised to cover himself and would watch the show. There's always been that rumor that Ozzy shows up at some of those UK shows. So Ozzy was a big wrestling fan. Did Nikki Sixx write "Close My Eyes Forever"? I think he claims that in the dirt. And I don't know if that's true. That's a great song though. Lita Ford's whole arc has been kind of sad to watch. I think it'd be a lot cooler if Lita Ford was like the cool grandma of metal, But I mean, our metal gods they're getting up there, guys. And we talked about it earlier about there being a generation gap in pro wrestling. The generation gap in rock, I think, is and music as a whole, but especially in rock music, that's like a real thing. Because even the bands that are huge and that are popular now, that are with the young people, by the time they're going to get the full sort of platform that these older bands get, they're already going to be older bands themselves. A huge generation gap in rock music, much bigger than the generation gap I was trying to speak to earlier in the show. Although we could always do like a fun. It was at WrestleMania 3, Fernando. Is that where it was? I like Hailstorm. I can live or die. Oh, it's that too. I thought it was 2, but I know it's one of those. It's before the Trump WrestleManias. That's what I know. Yeah, David Draymond. Other than the Sound of Silence, I can do that. Ozzy was 2 in the British Bulldog. That makes sense for that to be the team. You guys know everything. Like I should never have to do. Oh, okay, that's what it is. Oh, is it Alex Cooper? I was confused. Okay, Alice Cooper was at WrestleMania 3. Okay, so is he coming down on one of those big like Segway things, those scissor lifts? Does Alice Cooper does he have the snake with that one? I don't know. You guys know everything. Again, I don't have to do any research for the show. You guys just tell me what to do. Thanks for hanging with me today, guys. A little bit of a weird show today. It's an odd energy, odd deal. Maybe the long, drawn out commentaries aren't really my thing. We will see. We will continue to keep the Wrestling Twitter Hall of Fame, the setting the record straight and all that. But I think next week we're going to have a bit of a twofold show. We'll do a little bit of SummerSlam preview because it'll be the SummerSlam go home week. But you know me, I like anniversaries. And this is going to be an anniversary we're going to celebrate next week. It's going to be a few weeks ahead, but SummerSlam's happening earlier this year. But this year marks 20 years since two of the most infamous matches that were on the same card in WWE history happened. I think you know what I'm talking about. One of them is a ladder match where someone missed their cue. And another match is a match with the greatest selling of all time. Something tells me that we're going to talk about that ladder match and we're going to break down every ridiculous angle of that match that happened 20 years ago, along with breaking down the current SummerSlam card. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging with me. I will hang out with you guys next week. See ya.